Hey everybody, welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast with one of the two of us in Chicago right now. I am Kevin McCaffrey. I'm one of the hosts. I'm not in Chicago, although I will be, I think, maybe next week when we do this, possibly.
Nice.
Adam Mamawala is over there in the home portion of the Away Games. You're in Chicago
Exactly.
right now.
I think the last time we did this, we were in the opposite locations. So it is nice for me to get some time in Chicago, and I'm just gonna say 5-1.
It's
5-1 over the past. I've been at 6 of the last 8 Cubs games. They've gone 5-1 when I was there.
That's really, I mean, that is statistically improbable, much like your run this whole time. You had the 3-game in-person losing streak in St. Louis, but I think that can be blamed on either me or Ken, probably, because we were, you, me, and...
Or Andy. No disrespect, but she has blamed herself many times. So.
That's true. No disrespect at all. But our friends, our
Cup of Cubby Blue friends.
Yeah, podcast friends. But yeah, besides that, man, you're still friggin' rolling.
I guess I am. I mean, if I look at my overall personal numbers this year, I guess I'm 6-4, which is exactly what the Cubs are.
Right, as a team.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the Cubs have gone 6-4 over the last 10 and lost 2 games because the Cardinals are pulling a second half Brewers and just they don't lose anymore. They have decided not to lose, which is very frustrating. Cubs have gone 6-4 over the last 10, which is decent, but they've lost 2 games in the standings. They're 3 back of the Cardinals right now. After yesterday, Jack Flaherty threw a no-hitter for the first 5 innings, and then the Cardinals beat the Giants 1-0. So the Cardinals are even winning their one-run game, games where they score 1 at this point, which is very frustrating. But they
faced Bumgarner today, so hopefully there's a chance that he could be Bumgarner of old.
Yeah.
But it just feels like they'll never lose again. And it's super frustrating for this to seemingly be happening 2 years in a row where one of the other teams just gets stupid hot at the end. However, it's happening earlier for the Cardinals than it did for the Brewers.
Right.
Like the Brewers just finished up furiously, and then the Cubs found themselves all of a sudden not winning the division, whereas you would think that they're going to cool down at some point. I don't believe the Cardinals are this good. They're good, but they're not like 18 of 22 good.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't seem like they have a 100-win type roster, but they've been real good lately. Dexter Fowler's been very good lately for them too. All the pitching has come through. They have a lot of they have a lot of very good pitching that you don't think about a lot, but Jack Flaherty is putting together a poor man's second half Arrieta from 2015. He's ERA under 1, I believe. And then, as we said, almost through a large portion of the game as a no-hitter yesterday. But, fuck it. Let's worry about them when we have to later, which will be 7 of the last 10 games of the season are going to be Cubs versus the Cardinals. So if you stay within striking distance, you're going to have a chance to just win it head-to-head off of them. But one thing you got to do is also stay ahead of the Brewers. The Cubs are 4 ahead of the Brewers right now, but another Milwaukee series coming up.
Yeah, and I went to the game last night. So we're recording this early on Wednesday morning. I went to the game last night with Ken Schultz at @KenSchultz_ on Twitter, and I was saying to him you have 7 of the last 10 against St. Louis. So if you're within a few games, you have a shot. But if you're still, let's say you're even still 3 back going into those 10 games, now you've put yourself in a position where you kind of have to win 5 of those 7 probably
to go to the playoffs, or to get to a 1-game playoff. Yeah,
right, exactly. Because I mean, let's say you're 3 down, and then you have the Cardinals for 3 games at Wrigley, which is the first series that they have. You need to win. If you win 2 of 3, you're only making up a game.
Right. Yeah, it's in that sense, the Cubs might have a little bit of an advantage going into. But the schedule is tough in that there's no days off. Basically, we're speaking as Adam said. We're recording this just before the episode comes out on Wednesday morning. Today is the Cubs' last off day until September 23rd, and that's it. And then the season's over. So the Cubs play every day from here on out, which is exactly what they did last year, except for an even longer stretch. But here's the thing. This upcoming week is 4 against Milwaukee. The Cubs really have to go buckle up and go take 3 of 4 there and put some distance, with you, which is tough to do, but they should do it. You're better, act like it. And finally, the lineup is coming into focus a little bit more, which we'll talk about in a second. After that, it's 4 at San Diego. You got to win a bunch of those. And then 3 at home versus Pittsburgh, 3 at home versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati, thanks for fucking nothing, versus St. Louis in the double headers last weekend, losing 3 of 4. And then it's St. Louis, Pittsburgh, St. Louis to end the year. So there are plenty. I mean, basically, there's a Milwaukee series, there's 2 St. Louis series, and other than that, it's teams the Cubs should be beating up on, which we know how that goes. That's not always the case, but the schedule isn't, in terms of the teams the Cubs have to play. It's not incredibly daunting, really.
No, it just feels like there's no margin for error right now.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the case. But let's talk about the good stuff. Oh, man, over the past week, I feel like the last episode we recorded, we were really bummed out. Right? Is that?
Yeah, we were coming off the Cubs getting swept by the Nats, and it was right before I went to that first game, that first Cubs-Mets game, and that was a great series.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It went from great series to terrible, and then over this past week, the Cubs won more of the games than they lost, but man, the low was really low over this weekend, where they didn't score a run in over the weekend. They only scored a run in this weekend if you're counting that it was a 3-day weekend. They scored runs on Monday.
Well, I can tell you, because I was at the games Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. By the 6th inning of Monday's game, where they still hadn't scored, it was palpable, the frustration in the stands. Yeah, and you could see it with the players too. When Rizzo came up with first and second, 1 out in the 7th, I looked at my friend Tom, who I was there with, and I was like, if he grunts into a double play right now, you're gonna feel how just dejected everybody in this stadium is. And thank God he Rizzo'd it and shortened up and knocked it into center, and then it was off to the races with that Schwarber off the first base bag triple. But
yeah, that was huge.
It was frustrating. The first game and a half that I was at was just seemingly complete failure every time the Cubs had any opportunity to score. And I think statistically so. I think they were 0 for 20 or something like that with runners in scoring position over that period of time.
It was at least 0 for 21 that they got to, and the Cubs had runners on in every inning. Except for, I think, the first inning of the first of those 2 games, and just couldn't get anyone across until, as you say, Rizzo and Schwarber. And Rizzo and Schwarber are 2 guys I would like to take a moment to appreciate, too. And we tweeted some of this from @awaygamespod. Follow us there on Twitter. We were live tweeting the vast majority of the games @awaygamespod, and same on Instagram @awaygamespod. Follow us there. But Anthony Rizzo, I think people don't realize how good he is all the time. He's leading the team in OPS again this year. He's OPSing right around 930, and last I checked, he was the only one on the team OPSing over 900 after Chris Bryant's been in a long slump. It seems like the Cubs really just letting guys play through injuries and be bad. So it seems like that ever since Chris tweaked his knee, it's been a real problem. He got a day off yesterday. That's good, whatever. But Anthony Rizzo in that game when the Cubs really needed it, the guy is good every year. He's a great he's a high-level hitter every year, way better than league average. OPSing, as we said, over 900. Gold Glove every year. Spends half his free time helping kids with cancer feel better, donating, raising money. And the dude just broke the Cubs record, right after turning 30 for being hit by a pitch. So all the guy does is he's a great person. He's extremely good on the field. He's on the field all the time, and he takes baseballs off his fucking body every day. You can't ask for anything more than this guy does. And I think he is sometimes taken for granted. And he came through in that game, got hit by 2 pitches, and then shortened up with 2 strikes, put that ball on the grass in center field. Again, the best 2-strike approach. Another thing I'd like the team to take note of, and like to see more people do.
And he's got a real shot for 30 and 100 again this year, despite missing some time with injuries. So, I mean,
and a weird power outage.
I can't think of anything that says team guy more than I will get hit by 98-mile-an-hour baseballs, and I will shorten up on with 2 strikes every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did, and he came through in that game when they needed it. He knocked that first run across when it felt like it was an absolute impossibility that anyone else is going to do it. And then Schwarber came through, and Schwarber's the other guy I want to talk about. So as wonderful as Nicholas Castellanos has been, which he has been, since July 28th, Schwarber is leading the team in OPS, and that includes Nicholas Castellanos' insane run with the Cubs. Schwarber is a little ahead of Castellanos, both OPSing over 1,000 since then, but that's how good Kyle Schwarber has been since July.
He was unbelievable last night.
Yeah. Single, double, walk, and a bomb?
Yeah, I think maybe 2 singles and the home run and a walk, but I mean, every ball was just crushed. Like, the singles were coming off real hot.
And that's something he said.
And going the opposite way, too.
Yeah, and that's another thing. He's raised the percentage of balls he's putting the opposite way significantly over the second half. So this seems like he's been very good since basically the beginning of July, really good since the end of July. And this seems like it's not just a hot streak. And that is just a significant portion of the season, so that's more than a quote-unquote streak. But it seems like there are tangible things that he's doing, the way he's changed his approach in a way that feels like it might be sustainable. Even if it's not 1,000 OPS guy, it seems like the approach he has right now is something that works, and I think he's settling into more what he's going to be offensively in a good way.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Hopefully the thing with Darvish is just a miss one start sort of thing. I keep hearing that he's on schedule to start Saturday in Milwaukee, so hopefully that's the case. But I mean, unfortunately, with his history, anytime there is any sort of injury news, you get a little spooked by it.
Yeah, with this history and just with, I feel like the Cubs hearing, you sort of get flashbacks to how the Cubs handle injuries and how they talk about them. All this on track to return, it seems like no one ever does. When they're on track, well, things are looking okay. It seems like if they don't say he will be back, they almost never are. But hopefully, Darvish apparently had been pitching through this forearm discomfort for a few starts now, and he's been very, very good. So,
you wouldn't have been able to tell in his last start in New York. I mean, that's arguably his best start as a Cub.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I would agree with that. And so hopefully we see Darvish come back this weekend. Chatwood did a good job in an abbreviated spot start, taking his spot. But the Cubs really do need what Darvish has been in the second half if they're going to make a run at this hot Cardinals team and try.
Yeah, and also if the Cubs end up in that wild card game, I think you're probably looking at Darvish as. I don't think it's crazy to say that he's a very strong candidate to start that game.
No, really your top 2 starters are Darvish and Hendricks in some order if we're talking about the second half here. And it's weird thinking about who you would leave out, because if you're ranking your starters based on what they've been in the second half, what they are right now, then Quintana is probably your third. And then you're talking about Lester or Hamels, who are your 2 big veteran playoff heroes. It would be weird to leave either one of them out of the rotation. But if you do leave one of them out of the playoff rotation, then or if you don't leave one of them out of the playoff rotation, it seems like you're just going based on reputation more than how they've been. But Lester,
which maybe you do in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to that, I guess. And yesterday, John Lester showed sort of why there is sometimes something to that. So the game you were at, he left the bases loaded 3 times?
Yeah. And it was a classic Lester. He's how many times has he done that this year and somehow finagled his way out of it?
Yeah, and it's something where you can say, like, analytically, he's gotten lucky in those instances. But that is an example of where analytics don't tell the whole story to me, because that is a human element, and you cannot tell me that other people are getting out of those jams as frequently as John Lester does, and I think it's because he's such an asshole on the mound, and he just he has that. He really does not get scared. He gets better when it matters. Whatever that, whyever that is, whether it just the focus gets tighter and makes his execution sharper, whatever it is, it seems to actually be the case and a repeatable skill for Lester.
It's so funny when you're watching him in person because even sitting up in the upper deck, you can tell when he's gotten squeezed or when he thinks he's gotten squeezed because there's a very specific way that he catches the ball back from the umpire when he's pissed, where you know what I'm talking about, where he catches it from left to right across his body and then dramatically turns and goes back to the mound. You can see him getting agitated, and then you can see him getting fired up when he inevitably gets out of it.
Oh, absolutely. And when he gets out of it, the just focused, held stare as he walks off the mound, where he just locks in on the umpire for at least the first 3 or 4 steps off the mound, just continuing to look at him, you could just caption it basically, "You see what you made me do?" He's like, "I can't believe I had to go through this bullshit, but I fixed it. You broke it."
And obviously he hasn't been without his rough starts this year, but I feel
he's had a rough stretch.
Yesterday was a classic Lester good start at this stage of his career, where he throws probably 30 pitches in the first inning, and you're thinking to yourself, how the hell is he even going to go 4? And then he muscles his way through 6 innings.
Yeah, 6 shutout innings, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the Mariners aren't good, so that's part of it. They have maybe 2 major league hitters in that lineup.
No, they're actively bad. I mean, the kid who was starting in left field, who actually made some really nice plays out there. He's hitting .070. So during that game on Monday when they couldn't score, it was just starting to be what are we doing here? Is this?
Yes,
they are bad. The Mariners are a bad team,
right.
And also the fact that they started 13-2 is insane. But that's neither here nor there.
Right. That is insane. That's like last year's Mets starting 11-1 too. Sometimes it's just a weird sample at the beginning of that year.
Speaking of whom, did you see what happened in their game last night?
The Mets, the Mets, Nationals are another team they're never going to lose again. Who, if the season ended right now, the Cubs would be playing that wild card game in Washington against Max Scherzer.
I did not feel great about that, and I might be there in person.
Yeah, you think you'd have to be. You were there the last do or die game in Washington.
I think I would owe it to all Cubs fans everywhere.
Yeah.
At least try.
I think so. But the Mets blew a 6-run lead in the 9th.
Yeah.
And only got 1 out. They didn't even get to 2 outs.
That's why. Diaz has been so bad for them.
Edwin Diaz is a guy where I kind of just don't understand how he's that bad, but he throws really hard. He's got a 91-mile-an-hour slider that moves a lot, and I just don't get why everybody hits him, but they do, Yeah, and the Mets really sold out, gave their top prospect, top non-Peter Alonso prospect to the Mariners in that deal. So as we talk about the Mariners being bad now, I guess I guess they were right on that deal.
Yeah, I would say so. What was it? Oh, there was a something Darvish did in his in that start against the Mets that I thought was kind of interesting. Where I don't know if it's Pitching Ninja or whoever put this up, but basically talking about how he threw a couple pitches that he had just learned from Kimbrel.
Oh yeah, the knuckle curve.
Yeah, and so I felt like that's a rare opportunity on this Cubs podcast hosted by comedians who seemingly never talk about their jobs as comedians.
Yeah.
To draw a corollary there, that's literally the equivalent for us of when you see some dude at an open mic tinkering around with a joke, and then less than a week later he's doing it on one of the biggest shows in the city and killing, and you're like, how did you I just saw you come up with that a week ago.
Right, and then it's already done and working.
Yeah.
Has that happened for you before?
I think it has. I mean,
I'm sure it has, but
I think occasionally there's times where something just comes out and it's already almost fully formed, and then it just works immediately. But then you still feel a little ballsy doing it on a hot show, because sometimes you go the other way where you're killing, and then you get too cocky and you throw something in that did really well one time at an open mic, and then it just bombs horribly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say you have a lot of very new stuff that is working lately that I've seen. So that makes sense. I can think of 2 times in particular for me when that happened. One time I was at a show at I think it was a place called like B Bar or something, and someone told us a joke that reminded me of a story from my childhood that I had never told on stage before, and so I was like, oh, fuck it. All right, let me tell that real quick. And so I had never done it on stage before, did it on stage that show, and it killed, and I basically never changed the wording of it, and it's the joke I closed my Letterman set with.
Wow.
So literally, I was just at a show, and someone said something that reminded me of me as a kid getting busted stealing condoms when I was 14 at a Walgreens. And then I don't think I ever changed the joke from that night, and that ended up being my closer on Letterman. So I guess that was like that's my knuckle curve, you know.
Now, to clarify, did Craig Kimbrell teach you how to steal those condoms?
Yep, Craig Kimbrell was on stage dicking around with some stuff, telling some very revealing stories about his childhood, and I was like, "Thank you, Kimbrell. That actually reminds me."
They don't call him Dirty Craig for nothing.
Yeah, not at all. He looks like he'd give shoplifting a run. You've been also, just speaking of comedy stuff, you were doing shows in Chicago this weekend too, right?
I was doing shows.
How was that?
It was fun, man. I was at Zany's with our pal Sean Donnelly.
Oh yeah, I'm actually going to be on the radio with him today. He and I are going to be on Sirius XM channel 99 at 4 p.m. today.
There you go. It was not what I expected it was. I had never been to that old Zany's before, the Old Town Zany's.
Yeah.
And I guess I thought it would be more like comedy clubby. I didn't know it would be kind of this like narrow room that like seems to be in like a building that's been there for a long time.
Yeah, very old building. That's where I
used to be a strip club, apparently.
Yeah, very very classic transition.
And that's where you recorded the album, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's where I recorded my album. Like a year and a half ago, basically. But that's fun. So you did that. That was a good time.
And our friend Ken Schultz was there with me, and he showed me where his headshot is. I don't know if you've seen it there. It is very old. Have you seen it?
I have not seen Ken's headshot there, but Zany's just had me replace my headshot on the wall. Mine was a 26-year-old version of me, I think. So
you know where that like front door is next to where the stage is, if you were to come in through that door and look directly up, you'll see a very youthful Ken Schultz.
Is Ken on the ceiling?
He's not on the ceiling, but he's like like towards the top of like a, I don't know, beam or whatever.
Sure.
I don't know what I'm saying, but
that's great.
Anyway, so I was there, and then I was at the Annoyance Theater doing stand-up before an improv show, which is somewhere on like Belmont or something. I don't know the cross streets in Chicago.
Yeah.
Saying on Belmont is probably like saying on Broadway, and I don't even realize I'm doing it.
Yeah, there's a few venues on Belmont. The Beat Kitchen is another place where they do shows there. Yeah. But that is one thing New York does better than Chicago, is naming the streets. You know what? Numbers work, guys. They tell you where you are. The grid system's good. Yeah.
That always makes me think of the Mulaney bit about if Home Alone were done by like a BET comic.
Yeah.
Lost in New York, it's a grid system, motherfucker.
Yeah, you just have to be able to count, and you can get wherever you're going. It's a good system. Good, New York's got some wonderful qualities. That's good.
Oh man.
Oh, and you went to the Cub-related Miracle the Musical.
I did. I went to Miracle the Musical, and I gotta say, it was pretty damn good.
Yeah,
liked it.
Nice. That's good.
It was obvious to me that the people who worked on it are not people who were like, hey, we're people who like the Cubs, and now we just are going to try to write music, and it's going to be bad. Like, it was very clearly people who have like had a career in musical theater.
Right. Well, that's good.
Yeah, and they did a cool job of like, the set was cool, and they did a cool job of like integrating clips from the season into it. So they had like kind of projection screens above the top, and then as the season was going along, like, it starts with a montage of like Cubs failures to this point, and then ends with Dexter Fowler getting struck out on a ball that actually was probably high to lose the NLCS in 2015, and then it's like the story begins from that point, and takes us all the way through the end of 2016. So even though it's like you know what the Cubs are going to do, it's unclear what exactly is going to happen with the family who they're telling the story through. So I was impressed.
Nice. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Who ended up being the seventh inning stretch person at the?
I'm sorry to say that I did not get bumped for a huge Cub. We mentioned last week that I was supposed to be singing the seventh inning stretch. That did not end up happening. It was a local radio host. I don't remember her name.
Okay.
So.
Sure.
More famous than I am, but what can
maybe locally, we'll see. But
but it was fun. It was funny though too. Like, predictably, there were kids there for sure, and like people of all sorts of ages, but there were also a lot of like old Cubs fans. And there's one part of the show where there's like a subtle like Hillary reference, and you could feel some of the older Cubs fans like not feeling it.
God, Jesus! Of all things to not feel at this moment.
Yeah, before they drove back to Rosemont.
And while we're talking about the Cubs musical, Miracle the Musical, let's talk about a business that we're tied with right now. Our first sponsor, Adam. Can you tell us who's bringing this Cubs business to our listeners?
I sure can. I mean, this could be our Stamps.com. You don't even know what kind of partnership we could end up having here. We are sponsored today by Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a new DFS app for prop bets. They have streamlined the drafting process and eliminated the need to do unnecessary hours of research by using only top-tier athletes. So instead of the traditional salary cap format, you build your lineup around a list of prop bets. For each contest, you need to choose 10 of the 20 prop bets, plus 2 ICE picks. We got to find out what that is. We got to research that.
Yeah, we really should. We are into this fantasy app, this game, but we should know that.
But basically, they're picks that protect you from any late scratches or postponed games, which is good because that's super frustrating. Each unique prop has an over and under point value assigned to it, and you'll be rewarded that point value if that prop is correct. So, for example, will Anthony Rizzo have over 1.5 hits and RBIs in the game? He did that over the weekend.
Sure did.
The less likely the prop is to occur, the more points the choice will be worth, and you build your team score around the amount of correct props you select. So again, this is for somebody who like knows how to gamble.
Right.
So this is probably not for like your first foray into gambling, but if you go to Thrive Fantasy, and you can find that in the App Store, we'll also post a link to it. You will get a free instant $10 bonus with your first deposit of $10 or more when you use promo code awaygames, all one word.
Hell yeah. How about that? That's pretty solid. And I was thinking about it. It is good for people who have strong gambling knowledge, strong sports knowledge, because it's a lot of very specific props. But at the same time, prop bets, it's a lot of over-under kind of stuff. A lot of 50% shots. So it actually also might be better for beginners than I realized, where you can just go in and it tells you you make a choice, and then you just make that choice and friggin' let it ride, So yeah, use the Away Games is the code for that. Check it out. Get your free money. I guess the last thing to talk about before we finish up is the couple of guys that just came back to this team.
Yeah, I'm so happy that I was there last night because I was really getting bummed when Zobrist didn't get into a game over the weekend.
It was frustrating me, especially watching this team not make contact when they really need to, watching them expand the zone, do all the things that Ben Zobrist doesn't do, and not do all the things that Ben Zobrist does do was really frustrating because he was activated, and I was just basically like, is this a cosplay thing, or is he really on the team? Are we actually going to use all the players at our disposal? And they began to do that yesterday.
Well, yeah, and I assume when you're talking about comebacks from Tuesday night's game, you're talking about the pinch hitting appearance for Daniel Descalzo.
Oh yeah, I mean the ovation. You could feel the emotion in the crowd for the.
Oh, and I mean the exit velo on that squibber had to be at least like 48.
Yeah, exactly. He really Descalzo'd that ball straight to the third baseman on about 14 hops. Boy. God bless him. He's gonna hit one really important homer. He's gonna walk off the Cardinals at some point, and
he might have his Randall Simon moment. We remains to be seen.
Right. When you can go into an offseason after saying the offense broke, as Theo did, and you can sign a guy who ends up being your sixth string second baseman, you got to do that, and then just say that your work is done, at least until you trade for Castellanos.
Our old buddy Temp Kemp is getting more regular work.
Yeah, and he should. Yes. But
certainly should. So, yeah, Zobrist returned last night. I don't know what the reason was that they didn't use him over the weekend. On Sunday, he ended the game in the on-deck circle.
Right.
And that was particularly frustrating because it seemed like Happ had been hit by a pitch and was standing at first, and then they reviewed it, and it turned out that the ball had, in fact, not hit him, and Zobrist ended the game in the on-deck circle. But as it turns out, I think it actually was for the best that he came back last night, because if he had hit there, you're talking about hitting in a game that the Cubs are down 4-0 after a very demoralizing home run that Kimbrel gave up to Yelich.
Right.
Likely striking out against Josh Hader.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of people having headed for the stands or just being in kind of a bad mood. Similarly, on Monday, I think before they got those runs, people were really bummed. So it was cool that it was kind of a fresh start yesterday, especially after Lester gets out of that jam in the top of the first. Here comes Zobrist, and it was awesome. It was everything that you would hope it would be for somebody who absolutely deserves that kind of ovation.
Yeah, 120% positivity.
Yeah, it was great. And and also that game was a perfect encapsulation of what Ben Zobrist does for you. He takes a walk. He lays down a perfect bunt a la get the Cubs started in Game 4 of the NLCS, like the exact same type of bunt.
Yep.
Makes great defensive play. And
a really important sliding play at second. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean,
also
obviously nothing too. I didn't see much hard contact from him. I don't remember his other outs in the game, but
I mean, the dude also had a full count at least 3 times, and that is just an example of what he does and why he is such a good fit in the leadoff spot. To me, I really don't want to see anyone else leading off unless it's Ben Zobrist or Ian Happ at this point. As we know, Jason Hayward has been in an incredibly deep funk in the leadoff spot and out of the leadoff spot over the past couple of weeks. I mean, he was 0 for his last 20-something with a couple of walks sprinkled in. So, yeah, I think this team, really, I want to see Ben Zobrist leading off every day unless he needs a rest, and then I would like to see Ian Happ leading off. And that's really all the only people I want to see up there, unless we're throwing giving KB a shot up there or something. Zobrist really is best suited to lead off on this roster.
Yeah, no, he totally is. It's great to see him back. And as for our boy Wilson Contreras,
baby.
Even before he had his first at bat, it was fun watching him from where we were sitting, because you're still seeing him he's just going to be who he is. It's his first game back, but he's still jumping up out of his crouch every 2 seconds. He's back picking people to first. He's almost throwing somebody out in the first inning, stealing. And when he came up, I think the Cubs, what happened? Oh, Rizzo, I think Rizzo grounded out to end the first. And I looked over at Ken and was hoping that when it was 3-0 on Rizzo, that they were just setting the stage for a dramatic Contreras return home run. And then it just ended up happening a little bit later. But that ball was absolutely crushed. And I mean, from where we were sitting, and again, if you follow us at Away Games Pod, you'll see the view from where I was sitting last night, as I pretty much recorded everybody crossing home plate. That was an absolute seed. That was you could hear it, and it was 450 feet away within about a second.
Yeah, 450. He knew it immediately. Him and Schwarber both. I mean, they hit about 900 feet of homers between them last night. Two real no doubters to the back of those bleachers, and they knew it immediately. That was really great to see. Contreras also walked. He also smoked a ball down the third base line that ended up being an out. But really, when you put Zobrist in this lineup, when you put Contreras in this lineup, once you get Javi back, and if there's a way to get Chris healthy again, then we're talking about an actually deep lineup. It's crazy how quickly you go from, oh my God, can we ever score again, to this lineup is dangerous.
Well, when you go from, and again, we're not shitting on Robel Garcia, but it was very frustrating on Monday when 2 times he was up with runners on second and third and struck out.
He shouldn't
hitting
be
in the 5-hole.
He shouldn't be hitting in the 5-hole. Hayward shouldn't be leading off. This is, this is. They just shouldn't be doing that. I think Robel's main value right now is pinch hitter off the bench who can run into one, and send it over the fence. But I don't really want to see him getting many games of 4 or 5 at bats at this point. Zobrist really does a lot for you in this lineup. And God, Wilson, I mean, Victor Caratini has been such an ideal backup catcher. He's a guy who could start.
Hey, he single-handedly won a game last week.
Off DeGrom. 2 bombs off DeGrom. And Caratini's been great. But Wilson Contreras is the best offensive catcher in baseball. So that's an upgrade. You know, it's a difference-making upgrade. Caratini has been great, and I hope he's the backup catcher for the next couple of years. But Wilson Contreras is a difference maker there.
And you know what? There's been a ton of talk this year about Lester really having locked in with Contreras behind the plate, which is some people were speculating was why he actually was like reinserted as quickly as he was, because a lot of people thought it wasn't going to be until this weekend series. And who knows if it's just John bringing his BDJ, but he escaped from some pretty crazy situations last night. And I'd like to think that Wilson was a part of that.
I mean, there aren't a lot of guys who can match Lester for intensity in a battery, but Wilson is one of them. That's a lot of real on the edge emotion between those two guys in two different ways. But those are two guys who give a shit. And that is fun. It's just fun to watch. And as you said, it's just fun to watch Wilson Contreras do anything. It's fun to watch him back just with his, real, like his ADHD style of playing. Sometimes it's not good for framing. It would be nice to see him chill out a little bit with the glove back there and stay down a little bit more. But, everything else is just, his value over the average catcher offensively and with his arm is so great, and his entertainment value over the average catcher is beyond even that.
And it's super fun to, like, I think any fan of any sports team, you love seeing people who care that much. And like, I think it was the first inning where it's bases loaded, 1 out, and Lester gets a shallow fly ball, and Hayward comes in and absolutely throws just a dart back to Contreras to hold the runner. And you can see how fired up Contreras is. And we're talking about the first 5 minutes of a game.
Yeah. And I mean, as Kyle Schwarber said to reporters after the season ended last year in the Rockies game, he was consoling Contreras, and then he came to talk to reporters and said no one cares more than that guy. And that's which is a cool thing to hear, and a cool thing for Kyle to say, and a cool thing that it's true from Wilson. That guy cares a ton. Yeah. And one of the most fun guys on social media, posting about how excited he is to come back and all that stuff. Also, Contreras just posted like, "Hey guys, I need memes." The other day, which is a funny post to see. And then he did block someone who threw a Mia Khalifa reference at him. So Wilson was a little sensitive after asking for memes, but it was a fun thing to see him out there. And it's great to see him back on the field. Let's get all the best Cubs playing every day at this point. It would be nice. It seems like we're close.
Yeah. So what are you looking for in this 4-game set against Milwaukee, other than let's go win at least 3 of them?
I mean, the main thing is your fingers crossed that Darvish comes back and gets through his start, obviously effectively, but also healthily. That is maybe the single thing that I'm most interested in seeing on an individual basis through this weekend. And then just like no more fucking around with the lineups. Like, guys have had enough days off or rotating whatever. Let's get the best Cubs in there every day, basically. And let's say exactly what that is. All right. So that's Zobrist at second almost every day, at the top of the lineup. And then however you want to do it, some version of Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, Contreras, Schwarber, Hayward in center. And then, that's, I think that's and Castellanos, obviously. Castellanos as well.
I feel like if you look at what the Cubs lineup was yesterday before KB got scratched, that's like largely the exact lineup that you would want.
Yeah, and basically I want to see Ian Happ giving whoever needs it a day off, and that's it.
Right.
That's the lineup I want to see, is basically Ian Happ spelling whoever, whether that's, Hayward in center or Castellanos in right or Zobrist at second, or as it was yesterday, Brian at third. I think that's the thing. You can put Ian Happ in it.
Happ looked great at third.
Happ always has. And he doesn't have a lot of innings under his belt there, but we've never seen Happ not be good at third. He can handle it.
Right, and frankly, he's been much better there in limited use than, like, Bodie has not looked very good defensively offensively this year at
No,
all.
weirdly, because Bodie has the ability to. I think it's just been a weirdly, almost an aberration of a year defensively for him.
Right.
And Bodie I would like to see come back up, too, because Bodie had a really good streak. He was hitting very well over the past month, and Bodie's really like just about the second guy I'd want to see off the bench.
Is he still down?
I believe so, yeah.
So why is he up instead of Descalso? Because they don't want to cut Descalso?
Well, our friend,
Why isn't he, rather? Yeah.
Well, at this point, the rosters have expanded. So in September, so you can have them both up. As our friend Brian Smith, who great follow at Cub Prospects on Twitter. Please follow him if you're not. A lot of great prospect stuff, and this has been a fun year for Cubs prospects too. But he pointed out that there's a certain amount of service time. Now, Bodie has been signed to an extension, but if he stays down for a certain amount of time, that preserves an option year later.
Okay.
So it seems like that's what they're dicking around with, which, I mean, you know. I get that you always have to be thinking about the future, too, but this is in your window. Have your best players up. And I really think, for me, Bodie's probably the second guy off the bench after Happ. So I think it's just about time for him to come back up, even though the Iowa Cubs are in the playoffs right now. You know what? That would be fun if they won. I also, whatever, you know.
Yeah, it sucks that they're, like, depleted right as they are, you know. It's kind of a weird thing that minor league baseball is set up in such a way that, like, if you make the playoffs, a lot of your best players won't be there anymore, or they'll have been moved up to other minor league teams. If you're talking about, like, you know, the South Bend Cubs, I'm sure some of their guys have gone up to Double and AAA because it's a ripple effect. But anyway, it's also got to be funny too when there are guys who just happen to be rehabbing, and all of a sudden you've got some dude like a ringer basically in a playoff game.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, like Zobrist was down there playing in the minors, and it wasn't like he was coming back from being hurt, really, you know. And then Wilson Contreras was there too.
He wasn't away.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. Yes, that's true. He was. Yes, he was heart injured. Yeah.
But anyway, so like the lineup yesterday before KB got scratched, to me is like almost exactly, other than Russell being in it, almost the exact lineup that I would want, which was Zobrist, Castellanos, Rizzo, Bryant, Schwarber, Contreras, and then your bottom three is Hayward, Russell, pitcher. So other than Russell's presence, and usually you'd have, you know, obviously you'd have Baez in there, and then that gives you the opportunity to have maybe Happ at second or something like that. But I mean, you look at those first six names, and that's without Baez even being in the lineup, and that's pretty damn good.
And it's the lineup that I believe, when the starting rotation is healthy, that's the lineup that I believe gets you to the playoffs. I just think it does, and if it doesn't, then there's nothing else you could have done. But it is time to start playing your best lineup all the time. It's fucking September. How is that a point to be made? But it is, I guess. So let's do that now. Also, extra shout out to an interesting guy out of the bullpen, Brad Wick, a big old 6'9" lefty who throws 94-ish, it seems, but in a way that guys have trouble seeing. He had a real gifable curveball where Kyle Seager basically ran into the dugout and it landed at the top center of the zone.
There's no way he got fooled that badly, but it was pretty great.
Yeah, that's the guy who the Cubs traded Carl Edwards for. I will always miss Carl, but it seems like Wick might be a useful lefty out of that pen now. So that's pretty exciting.
Sure. You got anything else?
No, that's it. That's all I got.
All right, let's go play some good baseball in Milwaukee. Thanks again to the folks, specifically Katie at Miracle the Musical, for hooking me up with the VIP treatment and some complimentary tickets, which I very much appreciated, to Miracle the Musical. Make sure to go check out Miracle the Musical. We'll post a link for that, and also check out Thrive Fantasy. Use promo code awaygames for $10 off your first deposit of $10 or more, or a bonus $10 rather. And follow us at awaygamespod. You know the deal. You got anything? Any final?
I mean, we got 3 episodes left before the season goes to the postseason. So that's how stretch run we are here. Let's get hot and finish it up. Let's do it.